Technologies presents Weld Wednesday with AWS. Brought to you by the American Welding Society. And now your host, Jason Becker.
All right, Joe, how you been?
Good. Jason, thanks for having me on the show again. It's been a minute, I think, since we had a conversation.
Yeah, I think the last time we got to chat was the IEC conference in Austin last year, and then you were on the show at the Weld Summit 2 years ago over there at the Woodlands, Texas.
That's right. Yeah, I think we had a good conversation on the welding trailer. Had some insight to share regarding your career in welding and kind of the pathway you can take. And of course, the inspection conference there, man, that was a great one. A lot of good knowledge. For those of you who don't know, the IEC is a biannual conference, and man, if you're in inspection or if you're in that walk of work, oh boy, that's the one to be at for sure. I'm sure, Jason, you can attest to that.
Yeah, that was a great conference. I missed the Weld Summit this year, but I'm looking forward to attending IEC next year. That should be, and last year's IEC was the first one that I'd ever attended, and I definitely want to go back to that. There was just so many awesome sessions and like some of the major titans in the industry. I mean, Bill Newell was speaking, Richard Campbell, Dick Holdren. I mean, you got like all these heavy hitters in the welding industry, not to mention we also had the folks from AMP over there. So I got to sit in on a couple classes regarding coatings, because a lot of folks that have their CWI, they also have coatings inspections endorsements. So that's something else you can kind of add to your repertoire.
Man, yeah. That was a good conference, and the AMP folks, they really did have some great speakers as well. I remember the ones from, I think it was Shell Oil, where they were talking about the subsea pipeline NDT and the inspection. And it was wild, really cool. So, yeah, man, great conference. Definitely looking forward to it. I hope to catch you there too.
Oh, where is it going to? It's going to be what, St. Louis, I think, the next one.
I believe so. Yeah,
that
I believe
sounds
it is
right.
going to be in St. Louis. Yep.
That sounds right.
Don't quote me 100%.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I wanted to get you on today to talk about some of the emerging technologies in the welding field. Like, everybody's familiar with, hands-on welding, be it stick, MIG, TIG, flux core, all the manual stuff. But there's also a lot of stuff coming down the pipeline as far as, automation. There's new technologies coming out in weld inspection. You've got tip TIG systems, orbital TIG. You got a plethora of different technologies that are coming out into the welding industry, because like the welding industry, like everything else, we're advancing. We can't keep doing the same thing over and over again. It's expecting different results. There's new ways to do things. And, as the senior manager for workforce development, I imagine you're kind of wrapped up in some of the new technologies that are being implemented in the welding industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a fair warning. I'm no expert with some of the, new technologies that are coming about, but where my role kind of speaks or works in this arena is really the labor market, right? And how do we train, attract, and tailor this workforce to be prepared for welding automation and in these new technologies coming down the pipe? And I'll say this, even me, cutting my teeth in the industry over a span of 10 plus years, 15 now, I'd bet. But the way technology has been implemented and where it's at now from then is remarkable. And I think year over year, we just see these new technologies, new applications, and how welding's really just taking off in ways that we've never saw it before. Like additive manufacturing, you look into some of that and how they're using the special alloyed material to develop part shapes and certain, components that were previously cast or machined heavily. And it's just wild. And I really, think, that is going to be something that we're going to see grow in the future. Obviously, that's just one segment, but really where this is all kind of concentrated is in the manufacturing environment right now. But I think we'll eventually see it kind of trickle down, and when I say manufacturing, we could, be in defense, aerospace, production of, automotive equipment, or heavy industry equipment or whatever the case may be, even medical equipment to that point. But yeah, right now the emerging is, in my mind and what I see kind of in the labor market space is how is welding automation being applied in certain industries, and what are the roles that current organizations are looking to fill? And a lot of it is the folks that I see are the ones that when an outfit, establishes or, turns in, or I guess I should say, when an outfit applies this new technology or invests in it, let's say it's a welding automation system. And it's really, it's either to do one of two things: increase productivity or increase quality, or it could be both, right? And you're going to have somebody that's going to maintain that, understand it, manage it, support it. And it still trickles back to the hands-on welding. That individual has to know how to weld, but now they got to be a superstar and well versed in that technology, right? And that's kind of what you're seeing is and I believe the correct term is integrator, and that's the individual or the outfit or the company that's going in and integrating these systems of welding technology to an automation, sense, and then turning it over to the company or organization to help support their product or whatever their process may be. So that's kind of where we see it. And quite frankly, you look at some of these roles and it kind of spans. You'll see it'll hit folks from the 4-year degree to even, folks that can just weld or are familiar with the technology or just familiar with welding and have opportunities to train and advance in that environment. So it's coming across the board. And the thing that I find interesting about it is when you look at kind of the concentration of it, it's really right now what I call the Great Lakes region, which is where a lot of manufacturing centralized. Texas, of course, and California. And, those are obviously big hot spots, big populous areas, and certainly a lot of things are going on down there. And I would also bet, if we kind of peeled back the layers, you'd probably see this being touched on in other environments, heavy industry, maintenance, power generation, things that we might not see welding automation being applied to, but in a way, it really is supporting that and driving some of the growth in those environments. And, when you look at an emerging field, it's kind of hard to like pinpoint it, right? Because when you look at welding, you got various welding processes. If you're a skilled welder, you got to kind of know them all, but you may just gravitate to one process that you really, really like. And it may be now we're seeing welding automation as a potential component to kind of add on the traditional processes like GTAW, GMAW, SMAW, what have you. And then maybe that automation piece is starting to creep up. I think we're pretty early yet, but cobots, robots, the visual tracking systems they have now. All of that tooling and those software platforms, they're all going to require an individual to help support that, understand the quality of the welding that's going on, the materials, if they have changeover in products or, components, what does that look like? And you're going to have that hands-on oversight from the welder. And you better hope that the welder you have is spot on, and this is really where you're going to kind of see, I think, the importance of having somebody who really understands weld quality and welding as a whole, because the machine, it knows a little bit, but it really doesn't know how to weld, right? It's doing what it's told. So, and I think some of the technologies that we're seeing are kind of helping negate some of the error, and it can change, follow a seam of a weld or whatever the case may be, ensure that the correct parameters are being held, for overall quality. But the bottom line is it's going to take that human eye and element to ensure that it was correctly done. So, yeah, I think that's kind of emerging. We'll kind of see where it goes. Right now this has been applied in all kinds of places, right? Like one thing that I see very interesting is take a look at, some of the structural steel outfits that do like prefab buildings, and that Python equipment that Lincoln has, right? Like that thing will process a beam or a structural shape remarkably well in a considerably short amount of time with precision measuring. And it's just incredible, the type of quality and fit that you'll get out of a component that comes out of that. When shops will bring that in and it'll help them speed up production or whatever the case may be, but it's really making it better for the actual welder when they fab this stuff up. You couldn't ask for a better joint or cutout or miter or whatever, the end what result is, right? So Not to say that being able to do that by hand and fit all of that and be prepared, because you have to know that to know what's good, right? So we can't disregard, I guess, the fundamentals, if you will, but we need to be kind of conscious of where technology can help support and make things easier for the welder, or just make things a higher quality. And I think that's kind of where we're trending right now. But yeah, it's the impact it's making is pretty remarkable too. So
Yeah, and I think that's why like the welding fundamentals are so important. I know a lot of schools kind of want to skip over the fundamentals and say, no, you need to don't worry about being in the classroom. You need to be in the booth. And it's a fine line between both, because especially, we talk about automation, incorporating technology into the industry of welding. You have to understand the settings. You need to know the difference between voltage, wire feed speed, amperage, travel speed. You need to know what all the different variables, how they affect the end weld, the end result, whether it's gas composition, contact tip to work distance, and then also understanding how to improve weld quality. Because like you said, the robot doesn't know how to weld. At the end of the day, the welder's going to have to teach that system how to do that job. And once you program it, hopefully it stays in there and, everything, works out the way it's supposed to. But if it doesn't, looking at that end weld and saying, oh, you know what? We could probably deal with, another volt or two, or we could decrease that travel speed, or, maybe the contact tip to work distance was a little too long. That's why we're getting some porosity in that weld, or, oh, we got a little bit of overlap in there or undercut. Okay, we need to change that work angle just a little bit. Having the fundamental understanding of what all the different variables control to the end result of a weld, that's going to come down to the welder. And a robot is just like a calculator. Garbage in, garbage out. So you can't grab somebody with a 4-year degree that's never had their hand on a MIG trigger, or loaded a stick electrode in there, or had to put a piece of tungsten inside of a TIG torch. You got to have somebody that's got that hands-on fundamental knowledge. Having a degree is great and all, and the great thing about the new technology is it's becoming easier and easier to program. I remember when I got the first robotic ed cell in my classroom when I was teaching at the college, and I was like, man, you need a 4-year degree to figure out how to operate this thing. And I've got one of those, but not in operating one of these pieces of equipment. And there was just so many different lines of code, and moving. There's 6 different axes you have to control. But now with a cobot, you can literally push a button, grab the head, swing it over where you need to, and program it on an iPad. And everybody is familiar with an iPad. You can run it off an iPad. You can run it off a Kindle tablet, or a cell phone, or anything. Everybody's used to that. Heck, most middle school kids have one of those nowadays, so they know how to operate one of those. So programming these massive pieces of equipment, it's becoming easier and easier to train somebody how to do. But the welding component, that still takes time. It's time under the hood. It's just like anything else, it's going to come from time, repetition, making, multiple passes, figuring out, screwing things up, putting in bad welds and figuring out what caused that, and knowing how to fix them and being able to convey that information back to that piece of equipment.
absolutely, couldn't have said it any better. And that's, if you have somebody who's the real deal, that's welded, has a very strong knowledge in it, and then they have the appetite or desire to want to learn how to apply that to automation, that individual is going to be a very valuable asset. You know, let's say you're welding on some really thick material, and the robot doesn't know, like, hey, I got to speed up, after these few passes to get this to lay a little flatter, so we get the contour that we need, or to make it so it's not as much material we got to remove, or whatever the case may be. But now you have somebody who's well versed, and they say, hey, let's make some adjustments on the equipment. Now look at it. Now you have that because of the knowledge, understanding, and the application of what they brought to the table from learning those fundamentals, and then applied it and are utilizing, effectively, it's a tool, right, to produce something and take it to the next step. And I think, like you said, it's irreplaceable to have that experience and that background knowledge, because that can be applied anywhere. You could even just go by sound, be like, man, something doesn't sound right here, we better take a look. And I think what you'll see is a lot of the new technologies, software platforms, and things of that nature are trying to eat away and reduce some of those items, like, oh, it's the contact tip to work distance is too much. It's going to adjust for that. We can set a parameter, and that's remarkably awesome. Because the contour of the material changes or the fit up isn't perfect. The machine can hold a perfect arc length or whatever the case may be, and that's incredible, right? But sometimes that software, that system may not be picking that up, and it might be an easy fix for a welder to come over and say, hey, look, we got to pull the plug on that and try again. This is what's going on. Or, hey, the machine doesn't know we're supposed to be running 90-10. We got 98-2 on this piece of equipment here. You know what I mean? So, and maybe there's software systems out there that, have like, hey, you don't have the right gas composition and things of that nature, but, and I think technology is certainly going to get there, right? It's going to be, fire up the iPad, program it, and let it rip. But still, it goes back to exactly what we said: weld quality and having that fundamental understanding of what a good weld is and how it's created, right? So, yeah, definitely, man. And I guess from your perspective, when we're talking about emerging technologies, as an instructor, you got your own school, and you're kind of in the field of preparing folks to kind of lead for the field. Like, what do you see as technology kind of advances? Where does that kind of fit in that journey for them from your perspective?
Well, so most of the folks that I'm teaching now, they're mostly home hobbyists, DIYers, makers, because it's such a short-term program. But I do have some folks that come in and they kind of want to take welding for a test drive, which I think is awesome. Going to a welding school, it's a big commitment in time, money, and other resources. So they can come in there and get like do a test drive for 1 week to learn how, I'll run them through the basic processes. We'll cover a little bit of shielded metal arc welding, gas metal arc welding, gas tungsten, and they know just enough to be dangerous at that point. But some of them do want to go down and, take a full-scale welding program after that, so I'll refer them to some of the schools in the area. But I mean, it comes down to demand. I know here in Central Florida, there is a huge demand for welders, just like there is across the country. But Florida is really big into manufacturing. So I know a lot of the companies that I talk to, they're dealing with automation right now. And they're finding the same thing. It's a lot easier to pull somebody off the shop floor that already knows how to make these different welds and show them how to program the robot than it is to take somebody that's really great at programming robots, but they can't teach it how to weld because they themselves don't know how to do that. I mean, even think about fixturing. I mean, you've fabricated quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
If you fixture things in the wrong spot, how do we compensate for heat distortion? I might need to tack those plates in there out of square so that once that weld is done, it pulls that part true. Or, how many welds am I going to put on side A versus side B to compensate, for the pull or the draw of that material? There's so much that goes into it, and I don't know that you can program that into a machine. I could be wrong. I haven't dealt with automation enough to know that, but it's going to take that human element to be able to figure out, what's the weld sequence going to be. I know a lot of the plasma systems, they really don't, or plasma, and I would say laser's probably right up there with it. They anticipate the heat draw, but it doesn't cut that way. So like if you've ever messed with a CNC plasma cutter, you're like, why doesn't it just cut all the parts from left to right, bottom left-hand corner to the top right corner? Mm-hmm. It bounces around, just anticipating where the heat's going to draw. It doesn't know, but it bounces around to keep a lot of that heat out of the part in the same area so that it's not turning your part into a potato chip. We got to do the same thing when it comes to welding automation. If you just hit the go button and you start welding, okay, this needs a 3/8 weld over here, you got to put a lot of weld metal down, so because max single pass fillet weld, I think even in an automation setting is 5/16. So if I got to put a bigger weld on there, it's going to have to be multi-pass. Well, am I going to put all the multi-passes on one side, or do I need to bounce around a little bit to kind of monitor and control that heat distribution?
Yeah, absolutely. And in that, automation environment where they got to cycle that machine, I think it's cycle times or whatever the terminology is how it moves around, how you can maneuver the equipment around the part and speed that up. There's methodology behind that because you can, the way it manipulates and moves, depending on the structure, like let's say it's a car body, right? Like you have to calculate not only the distortion piece, but how the equipment now or the robotic arm is going to move its way through the component. So, there's a level of, I guess, creativity or a level of methodology that's probably applied to this, in that sense as well. But yeah, absolutely. You having the background will never fail, right? Because you're always going to have that experience to lean on, and then applying and trying to refine it with automation, is only going to help prepare for maybe a more superb, piece of equipment or whatever the end result is at the end of the day. But yeah,
Yeah.
man, it's wild. So I think, ultimately, emerging trends right now, I think what we're seeing is all of these new technologies hitting the market and hitting the industry. And I think you can't ignore it anymore. Like robotics, automation, additive manufacturing, all of that is now starting to maybe be one seat at the table of the kings of welding, the SMAW, GTAW, and so on and so forth. So we'll see what happens over the next few years. I think, it's something that we can't ignore. And if you go to FabTech, October 15th through the 17th in Orlando, FabTech, they're going to have the latest, greatest technology, and it'll be there showcased in what it can do and its capabilities. And it's pretty remarkable. And I think what we're also seeing is some welding processes that may have been challenging or difficult to implement in, from a manual or, from a welder perspective. And now when you automate that, you can kind of take some of those variables out and apply it. Laser welding, things like that CMT that Fronius has, the hyperfills, things like that. Like some of these are now starting to become, when you see that automated, it's pretty incredible. And the amount of productivity and weld quality you get out of it is immense. So, and to me, that stuff I'm always curious about. I love welding, and it's, sometimes I look at it as I don't see automation as the enemy. I see it as an opportunity. And I think that's kind of the perspective we should have moving forward. I think right now, if you look at the Deloitte survey from 2024, their manufacturing outlook, the biggest concern is the labor pool. Where are we going to find people? And manufacturers, all of the big cheeses at the top, that's what they're thinking about. That's the biggest element in their business moving forward. And when they turn to automation, they want to try to utilize that tool to try to carry their business forward, grow it, make it more productive, and make the quality of their products more superb. It's a competitive environment. So I think that's kind of, we shouldn't see it as an enemy, but it's hard. Sometimes you're like, oh, is it taking my job? It's kind of that, anybody has a little bit of reservation, and I think, that's okay too. But, and I think finding what you like, and there's certainly a lot of that too, is those niche markets where certain materials are being used, certain technology was developed and utilized just to, support that and make the weld quality better. That was the end goal. That's, something to be pretty, proud of if you were a part of that process. And those opportunities are out there. And I think, you'll probably see some of that kind of bursting out as we move forward, with the way the labor market is trending and the way manufacturers or just organizations in general are trying to tackle that problem. It's not just welding. I mean, it's, cement masons, construction, electricians. It's, all of it, even in the healthcare side, the labor pool is a war zone right now. And it's kind of been that way for some time. I think everybody else has just joined the party of the skilled trades in that
Right.
struggle. But yeah, man, I think those are kind of some of the emerging things we should keep an eye out for.
Yeah, I think automation it's definitely a supplement to the labor shortage. It's not a silver bullet. From most of the companies that I've talked to that have incorporated automation, they're like, man, we actually need to hire more welders now. Now that we have automation, we incorporated robotics into the our manufacturing company. We need to hire more welders because now I can crank out a larger volume of parts. So now I can put 1 to 2 welders on 3 or 4 robots, and they can run these things and oversee the robots and program them and do all the things that need to go along with that. And their bottom line is growing. So now their demand for welders is even greater than it was before they started incorporating automation. And like you were saying earlier about additive manufacturing, it's going to get to a point soon where I think it's going to be cheaper to additively manufacture and then machine down than it is to fabricate from raw material. It's easier just to take, a powdered filament or a wire filament and just literally 3D print with steel or stainless. Some of the stuff that they can 3D print is amazing. I seen Teresa Melfi's presentation at the AISC conference a couple years ago, and she was talking about some of the stuff that they do at Lincoln. I mean, they had this massive ship prop that they were able to 3D print off. I think that it sits on a 6-axis rotator. The part does, and they just start welding it up, and the robot kind of follows it around, and it bounces around because of heat distribution, but that has to be programmed in there by the welder, because they understand how heat moves metal and stuff. But that's another piece of emerging technology that people don't think about. So I think one of the best things young welders can do to kind of prepare for getting into this technology is being open-minded. At the end of the day, it's not just going to be you in there pulling a trigger or, loading up a piece of tungsten or, running everything by hand. Be open to this technology. And I think that's where a lot of schools kind of tend to fail as well, because you got some of the older instructors, this is the way I've been doing it for 20 years. Okay, well, that's great. But the industry is changing, so we have to prepare for new technology. So start incorporating robots into the program. Start incorporating 3D printers. Show people how to do the design work. A lot of this stuff you can run remotely from the house. There's all kinds of simulators and software and stuff. Like, just get this technology into the hands of the students, or even some apprenticeships. I'm sure that, some of the trade schools or apprenticeship programs that are out there, they're going to be teaching this technology very soon if they haven't already. And if they're not, they kind of need to get ahead of that. But, a lot of people are apprehensive because it's all new technology. We've never done it like this before. So it's a lot easier to say, no, I'll just go find another job where I can, run a MIG gun and sit in the shop in the corner, and I'll be really valuable there. Well, you got to think about it. How much more valuable would you be to your employer if you can do both? If you can run that MIG gun, you can run that TIG torch, but you can also program the robot. You can design 3D parts. You can, run that machine. You're going to be a lot more valuable. So there's going to be fewer people out there that have that, that want and need and desire to grow and adapt and adopt new technology and learn that stuff, and not be so apprehensive about, oh, it's going to take my job. Well, don't let it. Go over there and be part of the solution.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's kind of, and through that process, understand your value, right? That might be an advancement in your career where, hey, they might cut you a thicker check at the end of the week, because now not only can you weld, but hey, you can operate the equipment. You can do a little design. You're valuable in a way that another individual I can't find on the street anymore or hire. And if I do hire them, they're going to ask for, higher wages. And now you have some bargaining chips to work with. So, and don't look at it like, it's kind of, I'm going to do more work for the same amount of pay. You got to kind of have that conversation too. And I think that's important. Know your value, know your worth, know the skills and assets that you bring to the table, because your employer, they're going to make some money, and you got to be able to convey that message, how valuable you are. But yeah, don't turn down the opportunity ever. Take the risk, go for it. You never know where it might lead you. Right. And I think, to your point with the schools, absolutely. If you can get in with an outfit or, an education, program that has access to this, and they're kind of on the forefront of it, and they're seeing it because their local industry is driving that, you're going to be far better off, because when you leave, you might get into a role that, hey, you're going to kind of start the early steps and maybe end up in an apprenticeship and go down that road and, receive further, deeper, and, way more calculated training on what you need to be doing. But having that initial exposure, that fundamental understanding of, hey, this is kind of what the robot is. Here's kind of how it works. Here's the lay of the land that I'm getting myself into. That's only going to benefit you moving forward. And it'll decide, you can make a decision and say, I don't know if this is really for me, or it's, I could get behind this. This is pretty cool, So, and I know like FANUC, they do a wonderful job with their education. They're really supportive of schools. They offer grants. It's a remarkable, whole effort that they have underway over there. And that's something, if you're an educator, I'd look into some of their, offerings and what they do, their systems that they have. It's pretty incredible. But they're really trying to support, because they see it, from our lens, we look down and we see there's kind of a disconnect, right? You have education that's trying to play catch up to where industry's at, and industry's getting a little heated because they're like, we need these people to have these skills. Where are you at? What's going on? So then they start investing into education, and they're creating that pipeline to try to bring these people up to speed. And that takes time to do, and you got to have an instructor that's invested and can take that challenge on and, grow the program in the way it needs to be developed. But you have to have the right people on the team, everybody, looking the right way to see the end goal, what that vision looks like, and then, hit the ground running. And that's just going to take time. And I think as we slowly kind of chip away at the fear of automation and technology and bring it more into that school setting, the more comfortable people will be with it. And the more, I think, curious and excited they'll be about it as a potential career. And hey, comboing that with welding might be a fantastic outfit. But to your apprenticeship point, that's something we've been thinking about, right? So how do you bridge that education, labor, issue and industry issue together? So right now we're kind of at the AWS in the early starts of developing what we call a national guideline standard, which is a framework for employers to adopt in their local state. And we're going to seek Department of Labor, approval of this when it's all gussied up. But the end goal is really for us to create a roadmap and a blueprint for a company to develop an individual that is competent with welding, but also competent with automation technology. So we're bringing in some of the biggest, brightest individuals that have been in the education and welding automation space, and they're going to share their wisdom, and we're going to kind of map out what does that training profile look like? What does that on the job, training look like as well? And then what kind of credentials do we need to align to? And certifications and all of that, where does all of that play? And then will this be a tool that we can use to help not only increase the flow of individuals into our industry, but make sure that they're a high quality and they're meeting the needs that we expect? So it's going to be a fun project. I'm not an automation guy. I'm excited about it. I'm not going to turn my way on it. Happy to be a part of the group. It's a great team. I can tell you that, and I'll certainly share more updates as we go on. But we're kind of just kicking off the early beginnings of what that's going to look like and what the vision, the end goal is going to be for this welding automation apprenticeship program. So it should be pretty cool. And
Yeah.
of course, we're going to try to make sure it aligns to some of the AWS credentials and certifications that are important to our industry, right? Where does that align? Why is that important? So things to think about, and certainly more to come on that front. But yeah, if you want to learn more about apprenticeships, we do have a site, weldingapprenticeship.com. Check it out. If you're an employer tuning in, it's kind of like a one-stop, shop right now where you can learn more about what an apprenticeship is. Why would you try to entertain it if you don't already have one? What that all looks like. So encourage you to check it out. And yeah, it's you'll get in touch with me or a member of the foundation, and we kind of walk you through it. We've been working with folks that are part of the Department of Labor. We've got a great standing relationship, and we can make connections to folks in your local area that can get that conversation really dialed into what your needs are. So we put some thought into it, to say the least.
Good. Yeah. I think that's one of the most important aspects of it is getting the educators trained up, because a lot of educators, like I said, they're apprehensive about adopting this technology. But if you can get them trained up and skilled up in some of this equipment, a lot of them are afraid of this stuff. But, you teach the instructors how to use that, train the trainers, get them all skilled up, and, then send them back to the classroom with that equipment, give them access to the training and the equipment. That's the biggest thing I've seen when my time at the college is you get this new piece of equipment, but you have no time for training. Like I didn't have a lot of time to learn that myself, so I found myself coming in after hours or when all the students were gone. But if you can take an educator and send them to school for a week, 2 weeks to go learn how to use some of the automated processes, be it additive manufacturing, robotics, or some of the inspection technologies that are coming down the pike, do that. Make those opportunities available. And there's not too many schools that are early adopters with this, the new technology that's coming down. I know Tim Baber with College of the Canyons. He's always like at the forefront. He's right up there trying to stay neck and neck with industry, because that's a problem in every major educational facility is they're always lagging behind industry. So you got to get right up there with them. So you're training relevant content to the students so that when they graduate from the program, they're ready to walk right into the workforce. They're not 10 years behind. That's the thing with a lot of education is by the time that the textbook's ready to be published, what you're reading stuff from, that was relevant 10 years ago. It's no longer relevant in the industry. But I know, like I said, Tim Baber with College of the Canyons, I'll be chatting with him at FabTech this year. Super smart, awesome program, always at the forefront of technology. Same thing with the Canadian Center for Welding and Joining, CCWJ, Patricio up there in Alberta, University of Alberta. I mean, he's got an awesome program where, they've got a bunch of robots, that they've been training students on for, the past 10, 15 years. So being able to adopt this technology early, show that to the students, get them, train them side by side with, some of these new technologies that are out there. It's just going to be better for that individual once they turn around and enter industry once they graduate.
Absolutely. No. And, having an instructor and a leader of a program that understands that fundamental message right there is critical. And we need more of that. We need about 100, maybe 1,000 of them, to spread out across the country. But yeah, not to take away from the folks that are out there now, doing good work in the trenches, hats off to you guys. Absolutely. It's one of the most rewarding careers I think that there is, especially if you've been around welding, being an educator is just, it's awesome. Right.
Oh yeah. I've enjoyed every minute of it.
Yeah. It's, it's incredible, shaping the lives of young folks and, but also trying to figure out how to integrate new technology, what that looks like, how the workforce is changing, how the labor market's changing, where the industry's going. It's, you're kind of looking into a crystal ball at the same time, and you're just trying to do right by the student. So, but yeah, I think, having that open mind, like you said, and, just making sure that, it's, you're doing it for the right reasons and you're preparing, folks and yourself really to be the best you can to, get individuals in the workforce that if there's a demand for it, at least they're dangerous, as you kind of said, around the welding automation. And then from there, hopefully the company or the organization can pick up the pieces and that relationship grows and hey, they might become asking for need 20 more students. Where are they at? And that's awesome, right? Because now that opportunity is you've created that relationship, that pipeline, and that's that's what it is at the end of the day. That's the end goal, right? So.
Yeah. And the cool thing about a lot of these technologies is it's creating more jobs for welders. So, you think about it, I've talked about it several times on the podcast. You got that skills tree. Lincoln put out this awesome poster that kind of shows, you start off with the basic fundamental knowledge of a welder. Here's all the different ways you can go. You can get into engineering, you can get into inspection, you can get into hands-on welding, manufacturing, aerospace. Now we have robotics. We've got, 3D additive manufacturing. You have all these different things, but they're also coming out with new technology when it comes to inspection. So even visual inspection now, they have cameras that are set up. So, if you're interested in becoming a certified welding inspector, you have new tools at your disposal. You can program, code compliant systems into these cameras essentially, and you can scan a weld and say, okay, it meets criteria for undercut, porosity. Okay. Oh, it's got overlap. Nope. Automatic reject. Here's where the defect's located. Boom. And it's going to improve inspection. It's going to take a lot of that bias. Bias probably isn't the best word, but it's going to standardize a lot of the inspection techniques and being able to understand how to operate that equipment, utilize it. I've got a buddy down here, Ray Flannery with Special Inspection Services. He recently got a drone, or his company recently got a drone because they do a lot of inspections at theme parks and stuff. So now this drone can actually go up there and do UT work. It's insane. It's got this little module that hangs off the end of it, and it's got I don't even know the terminology for it, but it can go up there and scan a weld and tell you if it has defects in that weld. If there's a crack or anything like that, they can do ultrasonic testing via remote drone. So, how cool is that? Some of this new technology again, but you have to understand the fundamentals of this stuff. You got to be able to program the equipment correct. You have to know exactly what you're looking for, but it's going to make our jobs a lot easier. And again, start embracing and adopting this because it's gonna just continuously come at us faster and faster. It's just like a computer. Yeah. You remember back in the 90s when we got AOL and all that stuff, and like by the time you buy a computer, you get a computer on Monday, by Friday it's obsolete. A lot of this stuff that's coming down as far as new technology, it's the same way. By the time you get a cobot, it's outdated. By the time you get it out of the box, they got new improved equipment coming out like seam tracking, you got vision, you got all these different options that you can add onto these things to kind of offset a lot of the human error. But again, you still have to have that fundamental understanding of how this equipment operates, what it's looking for, what it's supposed to do, what the end result should look like or should be, so you can go back there and fine tune your program.
Absolutely. And it's really at the end of the day, it's about making things a higher quality, really safety, right? You're talking about scrubbing welds, with a transducer from a drone, from elevated heights. Now you have a safety element. Drone safety is obviously, there's components to that, but that human element, you're kind of mitigating it to the point where, or you might just scan it and say, hey, look, we found an error. We got to send somebody up. Now let's make it happen, right? So yeah, it's incredible. And to your point, even with like AI and where that's going and how is that going to impact us? What does that look like? I mean, shoot, who knows? And it's happening so fast. This conversation here, you just might be like, wow, that was obsolete, but it was like 2 months ago, or 2 weeks ago. We don't know, right? So, and that's kind of, I guess it's a time capsule right now that we're creating in a way. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, just being, I think, aware and seeing the opportunity and what type of career that you would like to pursue with it. Whether you're in construction, the energy industry or manufacturing or whatever the case may be, there's definitely going to be some type of automated equipment. I almost guarantee it at some point in your career that you're going to come across. And if you have the opportunity to learn more about it, operate it, get behind the wheel, take it for a ride, why not, right? So I think it can only help you and make you more valuable. I look back to when, Lincoln had the FANUC weld cells for education, and we'd have to learn how to program it with a pendant. And now you look at cobots and you get an iPad, and it's just, it's so much more intuitive. It's so much more welcoming. It's not like scary like that, where you're like, oh man, I fat fingered it and put an extra zero or a decimal place somewhere it didn't need to be. And now the robot's getting all wild, so there's kind of some of that, which I think is exciting, and it's becoming easier to apply and use that technology. And that's really what I kind of think the future is going to look like. I think it's going to hit a lot of our careers. It's just where and what does that look like? I don't know, but I think, if I'm looking at the crystal ball, I think it's unavoidable. I just think that when the time comes, we probably should embrace it and just say, hey, let's see what this machine can do, but never forget our roots, right? You can't forget your heritage and where your roots of welding started, because you're going to lean on that and you're going to be like, I don't know about this piece of equipment. It's getting a little wild, or whatever the case may be. But, just always being prepared for that, I think, will be the most beneficial piece at the end, because you've done it hands-on, you understand it, and that is core in my mind. But being open, aware, and perceptive to what the future holds, I think, is also a huge benefit for anybody that's going to look into a welding career. But and if it really interests you, yeah, I totally would try to find a program that's what you're interested in, and they have welding automation or some type of caveat to that. Explore it, take a look at it. Even if you're a young kid, in high school or whatever the case may be, and there's a community college down the road, they're having an open house and they got a robot in there or whatever it is, ask, learn. I'm sure you'll be intrigued. So, and we need you. That's the main message, is we need folks like this, and there's a demand for them, and I believe that's only going to increase. So, and some of these folks, I look at some of the salaries. It's like one of them was like starting off at like 168,000 a year for being a manager of welding automation equipment for a production facility, and I think it was like Oregon. I'm like, holy smokes! I'm like, that's pretty good money. You know what I mean?
And it won't take you long to get that management position either. Once you get in there, you put in 6 to 8 months. I mean, you might be eligible at that point.
You might, yeah. So, and I think that's the companies see the opportunity. Hey, this is going to boost quality, productivity, and that in return, is going to help us out. And there's a lot of other factors. People are like, well, that's going to take jobs away. Well, it might, but it might make the company grow. Then that company might invest in more people, in more, products or markets that they can expand in. And just from that initial investment, it might turn into something even bigger. That company might grow over time. And I think you can always find a negative, But if you try to be optimistic about it and try to find the positive in it, you'll always find that too. So, and there's always that argument, back and forth. Anybody can play the devil's advocate, but I think that's a choice, right? You can kind of say, hey, yeah, well, what about this? But bottom line is yeah, that's what I think. I think it's inevitable, Jason. I really do. I think that technology is probably going to touch on all the careers, even from the inspection side. It's there. We see it. It's not going away. And, embrace it, utilize it, learn it to the best of your abilities. And, if it's making things easier and it's working better, why not? Right. So.
Yeah. I mean, it's just at the end of the day, it's going to make your life easier. It's going to make your work a lot safer. I mean, there's a reason we're not riding horse and buggies to work anymore, right? Everybody wants to talk about, oh, no, you're cheating. There's no cheating in welding. There's, if I can get it done faster, easier, cheaper, safer, at the end of the day, that's just going to be better for me, better for my body and all that stuff, because I'm not doing the heavy lifting anymore. I've got a robot over there that's, sucking the fumes as it's welding. And I'm over here, playing on my iPad. Well, not really, like programming the iPad, showing that piece of equipment to, how to do exactly everything it needs to do. It's much safer. I'm out of the welding zone. I mean, you got systems now where they can put them in place and you can completely operate the thing remotely. You can go off into a small shed and you can't even see the arc. You're looking through the lens on a computer screen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's wild, man. And exactly, well said. It's only going to benefit, I think, at the end of the day, and some things we don't want to let go of, but it may be obsolete. It might be time to move on, and that's okay, So, but yeah, Fab Tech's coming up. We'll get to see that stuff on the show floor. It'll be great. Kind of see what the latest and greatest is, and certainly, I think, some of the other resources we mentioned. If you're interested in apprenticeships, we have that, and obviously the labor market and where it's at. AWS offers a resource, weldingworkforcedata.com. That's a good one to kind of lean on. Latest and greatest, kind of gives you the labor shortage, some of the demographics. And, we also have jobs in welding, right? Posting some of these jobs, if you're a member or if you're an organization looking to hire or looking to post an opportunity, we got that. Of course, as technology advances, we'll stay on top of it with our Careers in Welding website, careersinwelding.com. It takes you right there. But I think if you got any questions or, you're curious about what things are going, I think AWS is on the top of it. We're, again, from our lens, the codes, the standards, the safety aspect of everything, that's the central hub. So, staying in tune with that and, understanding where it's going. Sometimes the best eyes are, being in the club, I guess, if you would, but it's done right by me, and I'd recommend it to most. But hey, it's certainly AWS.org. You can find more about that. But yeah, it's definitely automation and technology will not go away. One thing I think we look at though is like, hey, what if the internet goes off? What if the power grid goes off? Yeah, it might happen.
Yeah.
They're going to turn it back on eventually. And if they don't, shoot, then we got a bigger problem at hand. But yeah, bottom line is I think it's all trending in a good direction, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
No, for sure. Well, Joe, before we get out of here, thanks once again for coming on the podcast. If anybody wants to reach out directly to you, what's the best way to get a hold of you? Yeah,
if you want to get a hold of me, jyoung@aws.org. Shoot me an email. I'll get back to you as quick as I can. And yeah, we could pick up the phone, or communicate, over email, whatever works best for you. And yeah, whatever you need, I'm happy to help.
Awesome, Joe. It's been a pleasure having you back on the podcast, and I look forward to seeing you once again at Fab Tech this year in Orlando.
Jason, as always, great conversation. Thanks for doing what you do, and appreciate the opportunity to come back on the show. And hey, if I don't see you, we'll be sure to catch up at Fab Tech here in a couple months.
Yeah, I'll be sure to link up with you.
Excellent. Looking forward to it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to this month's episode of Weld Wednesdays with AWS, brought to you by the American Welding Society. For more information on how you can get involved with AWS, just head on over to the website, aws.org. I hope you all have a great rest of your week. Stay safe out there, and until next time, make every weld better than your last.